proverb, where there is a will, there is a way. Quote ends. He attained heavenly abode on 6th March 2019, leaving us with the remembrances of an exemplary life. It is my great honor and privilege to extend a warm welcome to the distinguished dignitaries and guests of today. First and foremost, I welcome our chief guest of the day, Honorable Justice Sudhanshu Dhulia, Judge of Supreme Court of India, to this lecture. It is my distinct privilege to welcome our Honorable Director, Sri Srinivas R. Katikithala, to the lecture. I also welcome Ms. Radhika Rastogi, the Special Director to the Academy, Ms. Saujanya, the Joint Director to the Academy, to this function. Lastly, it is my pleasure to welcome the faculties, the staff, and the officer trainees of IAS Phase 1 batch of 2022 to the lecture. With this, I call upon Honorable Justice Sudhanshu Dhulia, Judge of Supreme Court of India, the Director of the Academy, Bindu Ma'am, the Special Director, the Joint Director, to offer floral tributes to late Justice Katikithala Ramasawamy. It is indeed my honor to be afforded the opportunity to introduce Honorable Justice Sudhanshu Dhulia, Judge of Supreme Court of India. Honorable Justice Sudhanshu Dhulia was born on 10th of August 1960. He initially practiced on the civil and constitutional side before the High Court of Judicature at Allahabad. Later, he shifted his practice to the High Court of State of Uttarakhand at Nainital. He was designated as a senior advocate in the year 2004. He was elevated as the permanent judge of the Uttarakhand High Court in the year 2008. In 2021, he took oath as the Chief Justice of Guwahati High Court. In the year 2022, he was elevated as the Judge of Supreme Court of India. While delivering a split verdict in a recent case, the Honorable Justice quoted Lord Atkin. I quote, "Finality is a good thing, but justice is better." The quote ends. The Academy takes it as its endeavor to develop a sense of justice among the budding civil servants. Thus, it is indeed apt that today, a sitting judge of the Honorable Supreme Court delivers the Katikithala Memorial Lecture on the topic Civil Servants and the Constitution of India, the Constitution forming the fountainhead of justice in our country. Without further ado, I call upon the Honorable Justice Sudhanshu Dhulia, Judge of Supreme Court of India, to deliver the third Dr. Justice Katikithala Ramasawamy Memorial Lecture.
My dear Mr. Srinivas, Director Lal Bahadur Shastri, National Academy of Administration, the faculty members of the institute, members of the registry, the young administrative officers. I can see some of the senior administrative officers of Uttarakhand. Madam Saujanya is here. Madam Srinivas is here. Other members present, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great honor for me to be here speaking to all of you in this premier institute of the country. This annual lecture is in the memory of a great judge and jurist, late Dr. Justice K. Ramasawamy, who was a judge of the Supreme Court of India from 1989 to 1997. Now, Justice M.N. Venkatachalaya, former Chief Justice of India and a contemporary of Justice Ramasawamy, while writing his foreword to the autobiography of Justice Ramasawamy, which incidentally he doesn't call a foreword, he calls it a tribute. And he says this, quote, "This is simply a tribute from a friend to an eminent judge and a great human being whose life is a shining example of the virtues of truthfulness, austerity, grit, determination, and high purpose," unquote. When I was reading the autobiography of Justice Ramasawamy, I realized that it is indeed a life led by Justice Ramasawamy, which is actually a motivational story of how by sheer determination, hard work, and courage, one can surmount the obstacles of birth, caste, and status. So I'm really happy and I really feel proud of the fact that you have invited me to deliver this lecture. Let me tell you very frankly, it's not a scholarly lecture. I've borrowed heavily on secondary sources. Most of it, which I'm going to tell you, are the random thoughts which come to my mind about how I feel about the civil service, see how it began. And then finally, what I feel that there's one important aspect which each one of you must keep in mind while at your job as administrative officers in the country, which is a care for human dignity. Now, the topic which has been given to me today, that is civil servants and the Constitution of India, is a topic on which much has been written. We all know that an entire chapter in the Constitution of India has been devoted to it, which is chapter 14, some of which has been borrowed from part 10, chapter 2 of the Government of India Act 1935, but many new aspects have also been introduced. We all know what is an All India Service. There is an All India Service Act which defines the service, so on and so forth. Now, all of us also know that civil service as it exists today in India was introduced primarily by the East India Company and more precisely by Warren Hastings. And by the time of Lord Cornwallis, there was some kind of a system existing. Yet till 1857, that is till mutiny, and when ultimately the crown took over thereafter, this continued to function with the primary object of collecting revenue. That is all. Everything else was secondary. As Ramchandra Guha writes in his book, India After Gandhi, that it was only after the events of 1857 that an ad hoc and haphazard administration was replaced by a sophisticated bureaucracy. It was only after 1857 that new districts and provinces were created, and the running of the state was overseen now by an elite cadre of Indian civil service, supported by the Department of Police, Forest, Irrigation, etc. This, as we know, in due course became what we know today as the steel frame of governance. Later, it was the vision of Sardar Patel who could perceive the importance of civil service in India, and it was he who could visualize that this steel frame, which till our independence was controlled by colonial power to subjugate Indians, had now to be used by Indians to keep India alive, and more important, to keep India united. Sardar Patel was not only our first Home Minister and Deputy Prime Minister, but he was also a senior leader in the Constituent Assembly and was responsible to a great extent in shaping our constitution, particularly the part relating to the services under the Union of the States. When we read the Constituent Assembly debate, we find how the two very important articles in the Constitution concerning the civil servants, that is Article 311 and Article 314, were shaped and retained. Article 314, which has now been repealed, was inserted with the single-handed effort of Sardar Patel, who had to convince other members of the Constituent Assembly about the importance of Article 314 as well as Article 311. Both these articles were concerned with the constitutional guarantee to the civil servants. Whereas Article 311 made it difficult for the political executive to punish officials, Article 314 guaranteed the terms and privileges of the members of the Indian civil service in accordance with the assurance which Sardar Patel had given to them shortly before independence. As the facts go, shortly before the independence in the early 1947, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel had called about 30 senior officers of ICS, then ICS at his residence, which was then known as 1 Aurangzeb Road, which is now Anand Kalam Road. And he extended an invitation to all of them to join government after independence and to play the role of building independent India. See, this is a vision not many people can have, because those who had fought for our freedom, many of them were members of the Constituent Assembly, and they had an anger towards the civil servants, because it was the civil servants, mostly British, who had sent them to jail. But again, it was the vision of Sardar Patel which prevailed that said, no, we need them. Sardar Patel had absolutely no doubt in his mind that members of civil service should feel absolutely secure, particularly when there was to be a major transition in their role and responsibilities. Both these provisions attracted criticism, as members of the assembly had been imprisoned during the freedom struggle by the very same officials whom they were now supposed to protect by means of Article 311 and 314. Prominent members of the Congress, Mr. Ananthaswamy Iyengar, and many others such as Sibbal Lal Saxena, Kamath, Mr. Mahavir Tyagi, Nasiruddin Ahmed, and many others had opposed the kind of constitutional guarantee be given to the civil servants. Sardar Patel took the entire opposition single-handedly. I here quote some excerpts from his speech during the Constituent Assembly debate while he was defending the provisions of what we know as present Part 14 of the Indian Constitution, and particularly Article 311 and 314. At one instance, he says like this, and I quote, see, when people were saying that we have been jailed by these civil servants, why should we protect them, etc. To this, Sardar Patel replied, he said, quote, what is the use of talking about the service people were serving while we were in jail? I myself was arrested. I have been arrested several times, but that has never made any difference in my feeling towards people in the services. I do not defend the black sheep. They may be there, but are there not many honest people among them? But what is the language that you are using? I wish to place it on record in this house that if during the last 2 or 3 years, most of the members of the services had not behaved patriotically and with loyalty, the union would have collapsed. And he's referring to the immediate turmoil which happened immediately after the independence and the partition. And there was apprehensions that riots will take place at many parts of the country. It did take place at some places, but in many other places, it was very effectively controlled, again, by members of police and members of civil service. And then he says, ask Dr. John Mathai. He is working for the last fortnight with them on the economic question. You may ask his opinion. You will find what he says about the services. You ask the premiers of all provinces. At that time, the chief ministers of provinces were known as premiers, as you know. Is there any premier in any province who is prepared to work without the services? He will immediately resign. He cannot manage. We had a small nucleus of a broken service. With that bit of service, we have carried on a very difficult task. And if a responsible man speaks in this tone about these services, he has to decide whether he has a substitute to propose and let him take the responsibility. At another place he says, have you read the history? Or you do not care for the recent history after you began to make history? If you do that, then I tell you, we have a dark future. Learn to stand upon your pledged word. And also as a man of experience, I tell you, do not quarrel with the instrument with which you want to work. It is a bad workman who quarrels with his instrument. Take work from them. Every man wants some sort of encouragement. Nobody wants to put in work when every day he's criticized and ridiculed in public. Nobody will give you work like that. So once and for all, decide whether you want the service or not. If you have done with it and decided not to have this service at all, even in spite of my pledged words, I will take the service with me and go. Unquote. At another place, on April 21st, 1947, at Metcalfe House in New Delhi, where the newly inducted probationers were being trained, and he tried to give them a vision of New India, what kind of changes will be there in the service, who will the new masters would be, and what kind of a work is expected from them. He said, quote, the days of the Indian civil service of the old style are going to be over. And in its place, we have brought into being the All India Administrative Service. The change is both significant and epoch-making. In the first place, it is an unmistakable symptom of the transfer of power which is taking place from foreign to Indian hands. Secondly, it marks the inauguration of the All India Service officered entirely by Indians and subjected completely to Indian control. Thirdly, the service will now be free to, or will have to adopt to its true role of national service without being trampled by traditions and habits of the past. And then he says something very important, which is equally relevant now. He says, perhaps you are aware of a saying which is current in India regarding the past civil service, which is known as the Indian civil service, that it is neither Indian nor civil nor imbued with any spirit of service. In a true sense, it is not Indian because the Indian civil servants are mostly anglicized. Their training was in foreign land and they had to serve foreign masters. Therefore, in effect, the whole service was known not to be Indian, nor to be civil, nor imbued with any spirit of service. And yet it was known as the Indian Civil Service. The thing is now going to change. And then he said something which is equally important here now. He said, above all, I would advise you to maintain the utmost impartiality and incorruptibility of administration. A civil servant cannot afford to and must not take part in politics, nor must he involve himself in communal wrangles. To depart from the path of rectitude in either of these respects is to debase political service and to lower its dignity. Similarly, no service worth the name can claim to exist if it does not have in view the achievement of the highest standard of integrity. Unhappily, India today cannot boast of an incorruptible service, but I hope that you, who are now starting, as it were, a new generation of civil servants, will not be misled by the black sheep in the fold, but would render your service without fear or favor and without any expectation of extraneous reward. You are the pioneers of Indian administrative service, and the future of the service will depend upon the foundations and traditions that will be laid down by you, by your character and abilities, and by your spirit of service. You can look forward to your future with trust and confidence. And if you serve in the true spirit of service, I'm sure you will have your best reward. I shall ask you, therefore, to devote yourself to your studies, fully conscious of the responsibilities and opportunities that await you, and seek instructions from what you hear with a humble mind. So what we can see is that Sardar Patel's faith and confidence in civil service was for the reasons he has seen the kind of work which can be done by civil servants. During our initial period of independence and what followed, that was partition and the turmoil, there were real apprehensions of communal rights in many places. And at many places, it happened, there were bloodshed, as we all know, but at many places it could also be controlled. It was a young force, not many were there, but yet it could be controlled only with the devotion and hard work of the civil servants. And that is what Sardar Patel had in mind when he was addressing other members of the Constituent Assembly and defending the Indian civil servants. Now, over the years, we also find that Indian administrative service has performed reasonably well, though over the years, it is for anyone to see the many shortcomings in the system and the much desired improvement needed in various areas. In my opinion, and this is just an opinion of an outsider, you can take it, you can reject it, whatever you want, but this is how I feel. One of the basic flaw in the administrative system, which I find, is at the district level. In any district in India, about 50 to 60 departments come directly under the collector or the district magistrate, or as he's called in, like in Assam is called the deputy commissioner. These departments include police, revenue, education, child welfare, women welfare, animal husbandry, health, panchayat, industry, micro industry, and I can go on. All welfare scheme of the state and central government also have to work under him. Now, this is an immense task. Though the district magistrate has SDMs and tehsildars and other subordinate officers working under him, it is humanly very difficult to do justice in so many areas. On top of it, there is the usual day-to-day function of administrative work. It is very difficult for one person to deal with so many departments under him. In my opinion, we need to look into this aspect. I have been told by those who have much better knowledge than me about the system that suggestions have also come that each district magistrate in every district, and particularly the bigger district, must have at least 3 additional district magistrate under him, all IS officers. 1 ADM General Administration, 1 ADM Law and Order, and 1 ADM Development. I think this is a very good suggestion if it is coming, because I see, particularly in the bigger districts where there is so much to be done, it can function in this manner because the work will be distributed. Second aspect which I want to highlight is that today a secretary at the high level is having one official department, tomorrow he may be heading another. The question is, what is his domain knowledge of the subject of the department which is under him? Now, as far as capabilities of these officers are concerned, no one should be in doubt. These are our finest men and women who are capable of heading any department, but then there has to be a system. To my mind, these officers must be groomed for a particular department at the early stage. They must be trained in the subject which they are going to head in future. For example, if one has to become a Secretary of Defense at one stage, then he must be undergoing some training in the defense or allied areas. If he has to head the education department, then he must be given training in that domain subject and must be groomed early so that when he or she heads the department, they should be familiar with the subject. I have been told that in theory, this is already there, but I do not really know how much it is applied in practice. Now, another aspect which I want to highlight is that as an administrative officer, you'll not be performing only administrative work. As an administrative officer, part of your duty will also be to give decisions, which is judicial work or quasi-judicial work. You'll be called upon to monitor, for example, an inquiry against a delinquent officer. Now, it is possible that it becomes your duty then to pass an order ultimately, either to exonerate him or her of or to punish, or pass an order of punishment. In both the cases, you will have to assign reasons if you have to do justice. And here hangs a tale which I must share with you. See, Professor Amartya Sen in his book Idea of Justice, when he's speaking about justice in various fields, he says that what happened was that Lord Mansfield, who was one of the most powerful judges in England, Chief Justice, and one of the most celebrated judges. One day what happened that a man comes to him and says that, sir, I have been appointed as a governor to one of those countries in the Caribbean. And as a governor, I'll have to give decisions also. Now, I have no experience in giving decision. I don't know how to write a judgment. So what should I do? So Lord Mansfield tells him, look, you're a good man. Hear the parties and take a decision what you want to. In all likelihood, it's going to be a good decision. It is going to be a correct decision. But don't give your reasons for coming to that decisions. Because though the ultimate decision which you will take will be the right decision, in most likelihood, the reasons which you will assign for coming to that decision will be a wrong decision, will be wrong. Now, Professor Amartya Sen is critical of this, and he lightly tells it that, look, this is not the way it is done. Because if you don't give reasons for coming to a decision, then there is nothing, then you have actually not passed an order. So I'm saying this to you because many a times when I was a lawyer and when I was a judge, decisions come, and although the ultimate decision is taken is the right decision, but the reasons are not assigned. And even where the reasons are assigned is very cryptic. You're not supposed to give a detailed, elaborate judgment, but you must give cogent, clear reason as to why you have come to a decision. That must be done, which is now called as a speaking order. And as we know now, it is a part of the principles of natural justice and fair play. So you must do that. The one aspect which I will further add is that you'll be facing a lot of problems. People will be coming to you with a lot of problems. Do not take a decision. Just don't give a decision straight away. Before doing that, try to understand the problem. Try to understand the man or the woman before you. What are his problems? What is he actually trying to tell you? This is very important. And there, I have to speak on a subject which may look slightly out of place here, but I think it's absolutely important for all of us, which is the question of human dignity. You see, in most of the post-war constitutions throughout the world, including that of India, human dignity forms a part of the constitution. Now, either it forms part as a constitutional right, and where it is not a constitutional right, definitely it forms as a constitutional value as it is there in our country. For example, in Germany, South Africa, Israel, human dignity is a right. Now, why it is a right is because we know very well what happened. Germany had seen the kind of Holocaust and the persecution of the Jews which happened. So their human dignity is a right. The first article of the German constitution says, human dignity shall be inviolable. To respect and protect it shall be the duty of all state authorities. It cannot even be amended. Same goes with South Africa, with the kind of apartheid the country had seen. They have included human dignity as a right. Now, in our constitution, also human dignity finds a mention right at the preamble. When the preamble speaks about fraternity, liberty, equality, fraternity, and it explains fraternity, it says fraternity means human dignity. And of course, unity and integrity of the nation. So, but in our constitution, it is more or less as a constitutional value. We understand it as a constitutional value, though in many of the recent decisions of the Supreme Court, it has been read into Article 21 as a part of the constitutional guarantee. One of the most important jurists alive today is Aharam Barak, who was the president of the Supreme Court of Israel. There, the Chief Justice is known as the president. Now, he has written many books on law, like A Judge in a Democracy, Purposive Theory of Interpretation, and now the human dignity, a constitutional right and value. Now, he says, when he defines human dignity, he says human dignity is what? Human dignity is humanity itself. Human dignity is the ability of a person to write his own story. That's what is human dignity. I say this to you today because you are young administrative officers in the district will be confronted with several problems. People will come to you with problems of housing, electricity, bad roads, bad transport, education, law and order, and so on. And I'm sure you will be examining those aspects to the best of your ability, and also keeping in mind the administrative constraints you have. But always keep in mind, and please take that the human dignity of the man or woman who is before you, you must keep in mind. Now, there was a judge in 19th century England called Thomas Noon Talfourd. He was a judge in the Court of Small Pleas in England. And he was a very celebrated judge and a very good friend of Charles Dickens, by the way. In fact, Charles Dickens dedicated his book Pickwick Papers to this judge. Now, he had said something wonderful about judges, and I think it is equally applicable to all the administrative officers, particularly you, the young ones. He said, and read administrative officer when he speaks about judges, he said, fill all the seats of justice with good men who are not so absolute in their goodness as to forget what human frailties, what human weaknesses are. Because I think you must realize that, as the saying goes again, see, I am a judge, but God forbid I am never judgmental. And I'm also requesting you also not to do that, because I know one thing very clearly, that you see, every saint has a past and every sinner has a future. So keep that in mind. While you will be studying on various aspects in the academy, and I've come here before also, I have spoken to the members of the film club particularly, and I'd advised them to see a film called, there was a film on Separate but Equal, which speaks about the segregation in United States of America in the education, and how the theory of separate but equal was demolished by a celebrated judgment of the US Supreme Court called Brown versus Board of Education. You can see that. So similarly, if you want to really understand human dignity, more than the books and the academic lectures and the scholarly work, you'll be able to understand human dignity from literature, music, and particularly cinema. If you see cinema of Satyajit Ray, for example, in each and every film, you'll find what human dignity is, particularly when he speaks about women. Each character has that dignity. Similarly, in the work of Vittorio De Sica, in two of his celebrated work, Bicycle Thieves and Umberto D, it's only about human dignity. I'll just narrate two scenes to you of what actually I want to mean, what I mean by human dignity. See, in Pather Panchali, if you have seen, I'm sure most of you must have seen this film. There's a family in a village in Bengal, and then there a boy and the girl Durga dies, and the family wants to now shift to Banaras. So before they're shifting, what they're collecting the articles, small articles. What happens prior to this is that one of the neighbors of their family accuses Durga, who's now no more, she's died, of stealing a necklace, a bead necklace. And Durga says, I have not stolen it. And all of us believe it. The audience, everybody thinks that she cannot steal it. But at the end of the film, when they're collecting the articles, and this boy, Apu, if the necklace drops, so she has actually stolen it and she had hidden it. Now, what that Apu does it, he picks up that necklace and keeps it, and then he jumps out of the window, and there is a pond. He throws it in the pond. He does it just to save the dignity of his sister. That's a very fine scene in the film. Similarly, in Diseka's Umberto D, it's a post-war Rome. People are hungry. People are not getting food to eat. There are soup kitchens and so on and so forth. So there's a man who doesn't know where his next meal is going to come from, and he's going from one such soup kitchen to another. And he has a dog also with him. So ultimately, he's got nothing. So he finds a man who's begging. A man who's got a hat, he's got his hand extended, and people give his arms to him. So no one knows him there at that part of the city. So he goes, stands there, takes off his hat, and extends his hand. And that's the only thing he could have done at that point of time. And while doing it, sort of he gulps his dignity. And then we see a man coming from a distance. He sees him. He goes past, then he comes back, he puts his hand in his pocket, trying to give out some money to give it to him. And at that point of time, this man who is extended, his dignity returns, and he does like this, as if he's actually not asking for alms. So these are the two scenes, and you'll find plenty of them in the work of these two particular filmmakers and many other books, to actually appreciate what human dignity is. Now, I want to say at the end that you are the elite of the Indian administrative services. You are young, you have ideals, only young people have ideals. And moreover, you have the hope of the entire country behind you. What you are going to do from now, how you are going to work, deal with the people, will have a lot to say to each one of us. Whatever you do is going to have an effect in the entire country, because a lot of expectations depend upon you. Remember, if people will lose faith in you, there'll be little left in this country. And as it is said in the Bible, and I tell it to you also, you are the salt of the earth. And if the salt will lose its savor, wherewith shall the salt be salted? Thank you.
It is indeed my privilege to propose vote of thanks after such an enlightening session, sir. I take this opportunity to thank Honorable Justice Sudhanshu Dhulia, Judge of Supreme Court of India. Your Lordship, in your lecture, you emphasized on several things, and particularly about human dignity. Sir, indeed, you said that human dignity has been read into Article 21 of the Constitution of India. Sir, on behalf of the officer trainees of this academy, I assure you that anyone who comes to our office, we will try to uphold their dignity. So you also mentioned about certain flaws in the system at present. Particularly, you mentioned about basic flaw at the district administration in terms of overload for the district collector. We are very sure that Academy, being a center of excellence, will definitely look into this matter and further develop on your suggestion. Sir, you have also emphasized on need for specialization in terms of service. I'm very happy to inform you that Academy has equipped us with certain skills which are very necessary in order to survive in this new world. So it has also been noted that you mentioned specifically about the idea of reasoned order, and particularly in terms of rendering judgments from our part in a quasi-judicial capacity. We have been practicing that, and we will certainly imbibe that in our coming days. So on behalf of each and everyone present over here, I extend our gratitude. I also take this opportunity to thank our Honorable Director, the Special Director, the Joint Director, and all staffs present here for organizing this lecture. Now we come to the end of the lecture. Officer trainees may kindly be seated at present. Yes. There is a group photo that is happening at the Kalindi launch, so we'll have to proceed towards that. And meanwhile, any of you having any questions to be asked to your